Goodness me. Whatever are they serving at the shindig tonight?
Today's secret ingredient is
miso, miso, homemade miso, my favorite miso, my own miso.
Meanwhile, on the fancy ballroom floor.
She made you a dress that looks like you bought it in a store. Oh. I didn't know.
Why, Banning Miller, what a vision you are in your fine dress. It must have taken a dozen slaves a dozen days to get you into that getup. Of course, your daddy tells me it takes the space of a schoolboy's wink to get you out of it again.
There's no place I can be since I found serenity. You can't take the sky from me.
Looks good. All right.
Good morning, good evening. Good to see you.
All right. Good to see you too. I missed last week because I attended a service at Guadalupe Buddhist Church. So that was interesting. And, but now here I am. So
that's a very good reason to miss a
yes.
miss our Dharma session. So yeah, no, I'm all fully supportive of you being literally present, physically present in the real world at a Buddhist.
Yes. So
anyway, yeah, I've got lots ready.
I've got lots ready too.
I've got I've got both sets of writings that you sent.
Oh, cool.
Ready.
Perfect.
I've got if we want to do the spiritual friendship thing as another kind of episode, adding to the good teacher, I've got all of that pamphlet and the George Gatton-Me website of the letter itself. And
nice.
I also have the other Kudensho writing. So whatever you want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's up to you. I'm good with anything. I found some more passages, but I think we should start with the ones that, the topics that maybe you think are most interesting or.
Well, the Kudensho ones, is that related to our discussions about the discussion we started on New Year's? Yeah?
Yes, I believe so. Yeah, that was with Johan, and then we were talking about, I think, various things to do with. Were we talking about like sake and?
yeah, exactly. Yeah, all that. Sake in the temple, meat. Sake at a social gathering in the temple, meat, social gathering in the temple. On temple grounds and all that. We are going into how. The various teachings about of Shinran, about we don't try to make ourselves look like
like Renyo said, or Shinran said, quoted by Renyo, even if you are called a cow thief, you shouldn't make yourself seem like you're someone who is aspiring for the Buddha Dharma. Quite an interesting statement, right?
It is. That's as bad as being a horse thief, isn't it? In the North American sense. Anyway, well, yeah. What do you think? What would you rather do? I mean,
it actually reminds me of a quote, I believe, by Akegarasu, who was somebody in the Higashi Hongwanji a long time ago. And he said, it's like the best, being a Buddhist is like miso paste, Do you know what miso is?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. In the Japanese, it's a sort of fermented bean paste that's used to add flavor. And if you're in Japan, something that you probably are going to eat at least once a day is miso soup.
Mhm.
I don't know if you've ever had miso soup,
Well, I
but
have.
you can
I have. And
probably, yeah, yeah.
Anna makes it and cooks with it.
Oh,
Luke cooks
great.
with
There you go.
miso. So
Yeah,
yeah,
it's
she does a lot
tasty.
of yeah.
But he says, the best miso is actually miso that doesn't smell like miso. That's considered to be the highest quality of miso, miso taste. And then he says it's the same with Buddhism. The Buddhists who smell like Buddhists are the ones that you've got to be careful about. The
Yeah.
true Buddhists are the ones who don't, you never necessarily guess they were Buddhists, right? That's kind of what Rinyo and Shinran are saying there is, to the eye of, say, some samurai or monk in the Tendai or whatever, the Shinshu Monto were just poor nobodies. They weren't seen as Buddhists in the sense of the standards of the day. Let's say what a true Buddhist was. But anyway,
I'm sorry, I muted. Can you hear me now?
I can.
I muted myself because my puppies are wrestling and playing and barking quite loudly. So I don't know. Could you hear any of that?
Oh no, not at all.
Oh, good. My microphone wasn't.
Probably there's some noise cancellation
Yeah,
built into
microphone.
Zoom that kind
Yeah.
of takes out the background
Yeah.
stuff.
Good. And possibly my microphone kind of handles that. So yeah. So shall we go to the Kudensho?
We shall. So Kudensho, just so people know, is a collection written by Kakunyo Shonin, who was I believe, the second. It's regarded as the second Monshu of the Hongwanji tradition. The Hongwanji, of course, including both Higashi and Nishi, because at that time there wasn't a Higashi and a Nishi. There was only the Otani mausoleum, which was in where Shinran was interred. Shinran's daughter, Hakushini, made a mausoleum for Shinran, and that was the center of that became the center of the Hongwanji. And then essentially the original, Hongwanji Monshu was the caretaker of that mausoleum. And that was all under the Tendai structure. So it wasn't yet an independent temple like we imagine Hongwanji today. It was a branch or a sub temple of the Tendai sect. In fact, I think it was Kakunyo perhaps who sort of negotiated that structure or that system with the Tendai establishment. But I could be wrong about that. For details of Hongwanji history, I think your best bet is to ask Reverend Jerome, for as he is pretty knowledgeable about all of that stuff. But in any case, around that time, the Hongwanji, which at that time was simply a very small, it's the Hongwanji mausoleum, right? Which was just basically Shinran's gravesite. It wasn't a huge temple the way we think of the Hongwanji today. There's a picture are you aware or what Godensho is? Perhaps?
You've mentioned it and brought that into our discussions, but I'm not.
Okay, so this is the Godensho. It's from a Japanese temple's website. Let's see. Oh, okay. All right. Let me just go back. Here we go. So this is the scroll that is the life of Shinran, basically in pictorial format for teaching purposes, right?
Yeah.
And so it may be, oh, nice. This is a really high quality image, so that's cool. Let me see if I can zoom in. There we go. Oh, that's a little bit too much. Maybe like that. So each of these, and this is beautiful. I have actually seen these scrolls in person at both the Kyoto National Museum and also in temples, because most Shin temples will have one of these scrolls that's been passed down through the generations. And as you can see, it's a very classical Japanese art style. You know, these are ancient. These are from the Middle Ages era, you know, Japan. And notice the detail. So here's Shinran. Or actually, no, I'm sorry. This would be Honen, and then Shinran would be in the audience here. In fact, I think maybe this is Shinran. But anyway, this is Honen Shonin, right? And then look at these screens in the background. Look at that. That they're actually detailed.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
These are standing.
You see sort of fans.
Yeah, fans. And look at this one. Look, there's a bird. There's cherry plum blossoms. Again, this is Honen. This might actually be, I believe, this is the test story where they decide whether they're on the side of you know, what is most essential for birth in the Pure Land, which is it faith or is it practice, right? So they're writing their names. They're taking sides on that debate, basically. Again, if I'm making mistakes here, you know, hopefully someone will point it out. But okay, let's go back though, because what I wanted to show you here was, and again, you know, just the cool details in these is just really amazing. So this is, let's open in a new tab. So this is going to be the final scroll. And the way these are read is a little unusual. They're actually read from bottom to top. So if you see here, let me try to, there we go. So this is, let's see if I can find it. Okay. So this is Shinran Shonin's death, right? Scene. So this here is Shinran. And he's laying on his side, you know, being born and passing away to the Pure Land, right? And then this is the disciples mourning his passing. And then here you see they're carrying his body to an area in the Hagashiyama area of Kyoto where they would do, you know, cremations, right? So here's AR, and then this is Shinran's body being cremated. And then this is what I wanted to show you. So this here is the original mausoleum that was built by Kakushimi, Shinran's daughter. And as you can see, it's just a small building. It had there would have been a wooden image of Shinran. Now, traditionally, this wooden image here was handed down from Monshu to Monshu all the way to Rinyo. And Rinyo, you know, when the Tendai decided that the Hongwanji had gotten too big for its britches, and they basically the warrior monks of Mount Hiei came down and burned it to the ground. Rinyo escaped with this image of Shinran, and he escaped to, I believe it was, it wasn't yet, I don't think he went to Osaka yet. I think it was, what's the name of that prefecture? Anyway, he took it and then he built, you know, the next Hongwanji. So the Hongwanji moved around a lot, actually, just in Rinyo's lifetime. It moved around. And finally ended up in Yamashina.
Is that mainly because of the various persecutions, or
right? Yep, yeah. It was because of that, and also, you know, just the shifting. It was a very tumultuous time in Japanese history, and so there was, you know, the Ikoiki and the Hokkei and various movements, and it was quite the interesting time. But anyway, back in this,
I'm watching the Age of the Samurai documentary
cool.
on Netflix, which
Mhm.
is partly what some of the stuff that you're talking about.
Yeah. I mean, Rinyo, I think, was
Involved in it.
shortly after, I think, the Sengoku Jidai, so the Warring States period of Japanese history. But anyway, so this here is the caretaker. This is the Monshu. He's the caretaker of the Otani Mausoleum, and you can see this. Anyone who's been to Kyoto, who's been to Japan, is going to recognize these walls here. They're made of wood, and inside there's a walkway. They surround this, courtyard, basically. And then you have some interesting details here. You can barely see, because the resolution isn't so great, but you can see Shinran is holding a ninju, the statue of Shinran, right? And this is very much, so what I was going to say is, Higashi and Nishi Hongwanji, they both have a wooden statue of Shinran. So the question is, which is the original one, right? Basically, according to tradition, this image of Shinran was handed down through Rinyo to the modern Hongwanji.
Yeah.
And of course, other Shinshu sects had their own statues of Shinran as well. And then look, here's the Maniji with fire around the wish fulfilling jewel.
Yeah, wish fulfilling gem. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
So there's some interesting details. So that's what I wanted to share for the context of the Kudensho is Kakunyo Shonin, who would have been at that time the caretaker of that, the caretaker in residence at that very small, don't think of Hongwanji as like a huge, massive organization yet. It was just a little mausoleum, down the mountain from Iezan, from the Tendai headquarters. And Kakunyo Shonin was writing a lot of records of about Shinran's life and about Shin Buddhism. And one of those was actually the oral traditions that he was told, I believe, by his uncle, who would have been Shinran's son or nephew. Anyway, the family relations. But he was a direct relative of Shinran who was then telling these stories that he heard from Shinran himself to Kakunyo Shonin, right? And that's why the Kudensho, if you look in the Shinshu or Satan or really either one, it's fine, but I'm just using the Higashi one. I have it open here. I'll just briefly share again so you can see this.
Oh, you're gonna share. Oh, sorry. You were gonna share.
No, that's fine. Share? Yeah, I'm just gonna just share this. So this is the text in Japanese. And notice it's called Kudensho. So ku, this is the Japanese kanji for kuchi or mouth, right? It's like an open mouth. And then din means tradition or something that's passed down. Sho just means writing or collection of writing. So literally the writings of the oral tradition.
Oral tradition.
And then right here it says Honganji no Ran Shonin, that's Shinran. Myoshin Shonin ni, that's Kakunyo's uncle, ni taishimashimashite ori no on monogatari no josho. On monogatari, if you know, like Heikei monogatari in Japanese means like tales. So the tales that Myoshin Shonin told about the Honganji Shonin Shinran. So that's what this text is. Okay, now we can
literally
dive into it.
From the Japanese. Okay, excellent. All right, we'll share again. That. So this one first, then, yeah? Chapter 17.
Mhm. Yep, from Kudensho.
All right, shall
This is
we?
it.
Do you want to read these or?
Yeah, so just disclaimer. This translation of the Acuña's works is a little odd, in my opinion. It has some really weird. It almost feels more like to me when I read it, like a rough draft than an actual polished translation. I don't know why they did that. Maybe they're trying to make it sound Japanese. I have no idea. But anyway, I'm really grateful to the people who made this translation because otherwise we wouldn't have any English version of Kakuyo's writings. But when I read this, if I come to some part that I just think sounds bizarre, I'm gonna like kind of paraphrase it to try to make it less sound less weird. I mean, I don't know how else to say it. Just there's some bizarre translation choices. All right, so would you like me to read this or?
Either way, yeah, I'm happy.
Okay, yeah, I'll read it. So, chapter 17. For Bombu, ordinary unenlightened beings, acting brave and stoic when facing dire circumstances is futile. Shinran taught when someone is experiencing the pain of departed loved ones, bereaved when parting from father, mother, wife, or child, some people admonish the person to hold back and restrain their emotions by saying, a person holding the ninjutsu as the Buddha Dharma should never weep or cry inconsolably. People who think of themselves as being superior in knowledge of the teaching seem to act like that. Such episodes are typical of those who think themselves treading the way in accordance with various schools of the path of sages. It is not the understanding of one who follows the true teaching of the Pure Land way, Jodo Shinshu. Bombu is basically foolish and clumsy with anything and everything. We may act wise and good, hiding a cunning and deceitful nature, but it's a lie and for nothing. For instance, we may think that Amida's land of reward is the site of future birth, where undoubtedly we reunite with loved ones in the Pure Land. But as sadness descends and we say farewell to our dearly departed, the Bombu, confused, wonders why such misfortune has befallen. Herein we should realize, after spending long kalpas wandering life to life, world after world, the noose of transmigration around our neck, we desire this tale of transmigration to end in the present life. However, since this temporary abode is the old home filled with lingering memories and attachments where we could finally find liberation, how can we not miss this place and the people we meet or we met? Unless this question arises, we cannot be included with those received as Bombu by Amida. And then the next page would be the first one, I believe. Yeah. Even if one has the perfect true mind of faith, I think this is Shinji.
Yeah, that's what I would.
Yeah, okay. For birth in the Pure Land, since it is the end of endless transmigration and samsara, sadness and grief grow ever deep. Mourners encircle the bed and pillow, uttering stifled cries of grief. People crowd in a room, longing for the departed, unable to stop crying, distracting the deceased, not the least. As unassuming Bombu, it is unseemly to think one is unsuited for birth by other power. Thus, do not hesitate for fear of disturbing the realm where loved ones go. Crying and weeping inconsolably are perfectly fine. So this is just saying, like people were kind of had this idea, like we need to put on a brave face and, and act very Buddhist, right? When we come to, and not be like if you see in the great Nirvana paintings of Shakyamuni, you'll notice the arahats, or the arahants, the disciples of the smaller vehicle, the voice hearers, are all wailing and crying and distressed. And then you'll notice the bodhisattvas are very composed and not showing any emotion, right? because the bodhisattvas, the advanced, bodhisattvas in the Mahayana path, they understand what's going on. They understand that, phenomena do not arise, neither do they perish, and this is all just a show, right, that the Buddha is putting on. But the arahats, the lesser vehicle followers don't get that. So you'll notice they're wailing and they're all breathing. So someone might say, well, for us, we shouldn't grieve or let our emotions show when someone dies. And Shinran's saying, well, no, that's for the path of sages. As unenlightened beings, we can just be ourselves in that moment. We don't have to put on a brave face. In fact, if you think that, you have to sort of manage your emotions somehow in order to be, accepted or embraced by Amida, then that's actually self-power, right? You're asserting your own measure of yourself and not realizing that you're actually, Amida embraces us just as we are. So that's kind of the point of this. And so that's why he says crying and weeping are perfectly fine. It's okay to express your emotion and to, because we're not pretending to be something other than we are. We're just unenlightened. There's no reason to be anything else, right? So that's the message here, I think.
I'm very glad to see that I'm definitely in line with what Shinran taught in the specific situation of bereavement. In fact, because it's very interesting too. I was reflecting that while you were reading this, that my bereavements post sort of Pure Land Jodo Shinshu exploration parts of my Buddhist path was very different than pre that. My Buddhist path prior to that.
Yeah.
When I was young, it was when I was younger, obviously in the 90s, and pursuing kind of Buddhism, Taoism, and sort of naturalistic spiritualities. And when my brother and grandmother, passed away, it was very, I was trying to experience it as my understanding or misunderstanding of Buddhism and Taoism at that time, and trying to be a certain way and very calm and trying to communicate with people about this. And do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And obviously when you're younger, things, it's a bit different. Bereavement's a bit different, for me. But post, so my sort of Pure Land, Jodo Shinshu path, as far as me being conscious of the working of Amida, started in the mid noughties, mid 2000s, and then in 2015, my father, and then my aunt, who I was closest to and had it was a very significant person in my life as well, passed away. Like my father passed away, and then my aunt passed away like 3 or 4 months later. And totally different. My approach to the bereavement was totally different than that of my brother and my grandmother in the past, and other people, other family members in the past. It was full, like it all came out. My mourning and bereavement and crying and all came out, and that's interesting. It's just something I had known that those bereavements were actually very significant. Bear with me a moment. I just need my puppy is saying you hear them at the moment. Can you hear them at all?
No,
okay. As long as it's not distracting right. So I've been aware since that happened that it was very much, it deepened the experience of those in 2015, the very difficult bereavements, deepened my Buddhist path. The impact of that was one of the effects was it did deepen my Buddhist path, deepen my kind of the teachings of impermanence and things. But like I just let it all, like it, crying, all just memories,
Yeah.
regrets. I let it all come out, all, talk, and at appropriate times and things with people and things.
Yeah.
But I let and with myself,
Mhm.
but yeah, very different. It's interesting. I just never thought about that before. How different
Mhm.
post
Yeah.
Pure
Yeah.
Land, Jodo Shinshu, Buddhist path, my
Yeah.
bereavement was. Anyway, yeah,
When you were trying to follow, the path.
yeah. So anyway, we have about 6 minutes. What did you want to?
Yeah, so actually, I did find there's another passage. It got totally mixed up. I think it's the fifth one from down there.
It's
If you want to count over, yeah, that one right there.
this one. This one.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Here we go. So this is actually the continuation. This should come between the two. So,
Okay. Okay.
Shinron again. The more we enter the brave face, the more we doubt ourselves. Isn't that true?
Yeah.
Fostering a mistaken
Exactly.
notion of pursuing the path of holies, the path of sages by self-power, as opposed to a person going to the Pure Land by other power. A person headed for birth by other power naturally and unabashedly weeps on this occasion. No reason exists for a Bombu to act in any way other than the usual. Since actions of our body, the drift of our minds, and words of our mouths have the roots of 3 poisons, greed, arrogance, and stupidity, and 10 times of taken life, and so forth, all make this defiled existence difficult to rise above and leave behind. We are such foolish and spiritually inept Bombu who succeed only in filling life with Bono or Kleshas. Therefore, we should leave the one great matter of birth to Yorai and be unassuming and pretend to be none other than ourselves. According to the true teaching of the Pure Land, it is exactly the one for whom Anita made the original vow. Boom.
Boom.
So there's a lot there to contemplate, right?
Yes. Just that. Yeah. Those 2 paragraphs. It's the thing that strikes me is it keeps coming back to becoming your it's being being genuine is a really key thing
Yeah.
in on the Jodo Shinshu path. Obviously empowered and enabled by Amida, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Absolutely.
we're not to we're really not supposed to be putting on facades, which goes against everything in
Yeah.
our lives, in our samsaric lives. Like everything is a facade. You have to put on a face for everything. You have to put on a different face for work, a different face for family, a different face, a different
right
persona, for whatever the
yeah
situation was, in order to be acceptable in that context. In what I'm not saying that's inappropriately to do that, but it is like you have to do it. You have to.
Well, even religion. Think about it. I mean, even our Jodo Shinshu, in a lot of ways, is about and. We have a lot of beautiful ritual. We have a lot of beautiful. If you ever have the opportunity to go to, one of the Hongwanji temples in Kyoto, you certainly should, because, it's just the traditions that have been passed down, right, are, but at the same time, we tend to go into that space and then we tend to act in a very, spiritual way, right?
Yeah.
We're bowing, we're gashoing, we're going through this sort of, act, so to speak. Hopefully motivated by true, encounter with, the Dharma. But there are people who probably just go and, well, this is what I'm supposed to do here, so we do that, right? So there's a funny story about a Miyokoni who, and the Miyokoni were just. Are we going to do another episode after this?
Yeah, we are. We've got about 2 minutes.
Okay. So, sure.
We can do this in the cliffhanger.
He goes to the Monshu And he says, well, if you don't believe in the primal vow, you're going to go to the other place, right? I mean, that's not something you would think to say to the mokshu, you know what I mean? Like, he was just preaching the Dharma to him, just like he would to anybody else, right? And then the mokshu, so people were like shocked, like, oh, you don't say that, mokshu. The leader of especially back then, mokshu was like a very exalted kind of person. And so, but then the Monshu takes him aside afterwards and thanks him, says, thank you for reminding me about the truth of the Dharma. And they became friends.
Yeah.
So, I like that story about.
No, it's great.
Because that guy, as a Myokonin, he didn't have, and the Myokonin in general, they just kind of are who they are. They don't put on
they don't have
airs,
pretense, or
they just are kind of constantly living in that truth of Mita's vow, So
become none other than their genuine selves,
foolish selves,
foolish selves,
Which it's so hard, it's difficult to do that, and maybe we can discuss this in the next episode. But we can't actually become ourselves.
I was going to bring that up
without other power.
Yeah, exactly. So continuing, sorry I was a few minutes late. I remembered I wanted to, at some point in our discussion of this, bring in some things from the Lamp for the Latter Ages.
Yeah, sure.
To see how that fits with these things, because I expressed some of my concerns or my hesitance and things in the New Year's discussion that we had, and about certain things, and there's also
you want
things
to be more
about,
specific, just for
so about the whole idea of that there's occasions where sake or alcohol would be present in the temple grounds or church grounds, and meat, animal flesh, things like that, and just the whole idea of, in the context, yes, we need to be our genuine selves, Bombu selves, and empowered by Amida to do so. But there's also in the writings, it seems to me, that there's also things where, also enabled and empowered by Amida, we should be trying the best we can, the very best we can, to live within certain boundaries, and and we should want to, having encountered Amida's light and Dharma and power and working and name and call. So so I want to bring that into the discussion at some point. So that's what I was looking for. I'd forgotten that I wanted to have those ready.
Well, I think you're talking generally about the problem of licensed evil, right? That arose in the early Shinshu communities that Shinran addresses pretty forcefully in some of his letters, right?
So exactly. Sorry. So I'd just like to bring some of that in here, because I think it does speak to, how we should be conducting ourselves. There's, we're not just, so anyway, but let's continue though with what we were. I'll bring up I'll share my screen, and there we go. I think I've got, oh no, this is, one sec. Nope, this is not it. Sorry. Yes, there it is. Okay, there we go. That's it. There we go.
There we go.
And that's where we were.
So I just wanted to add, so Kakunya Shonin kind of references the custom so you have to understand the context of Japanese Buddhist culture in this period. Was the final moment, right, was a super important time in a person's life, because the final moment will determine to a large degree your next destiny.
Yeah.
So one of the things, there were many popular customs. One well-known one is that, they'd have the image of Amida, and then they'd have the thread, and the dying person would hold on to the thread attached to, the statues.
Yep.
And they'd have lots and lots of different customs and rituals that developed.
I think that's in China as well. They had or have.
Yeah. Probably a lot of it,
Same.
came from China, various, but, and, Honen Shonin famously refused the thread because, he taught, the Nimbutsu is sufficient. I don't, need these anything else other than a Nimbutsu, right? Anyway, so there was this custom of separating the dying person from their family and their relatives and their loved ones, because the crying and the attachment of their relatives would, as Kakunyu notes here, so in ways of the world, when the final hour approaches, a dying person who is deeply attached to wife, children, family, and friends, custom keeps them apart from him. This supposedly keeps the dying person being attached to them from distraction, falling into unfortunate paths after death. This case reflects how the path of holy self-power view is ingrained in the world. So he's showing how that, self-power idea is, very much a part of the customs of his time. In the contrast, in the true teaching of other power, Hadiki Shinshu, there's not found in such a scenario. No matter how people declare their intention to sever themselves from this realm, without the support from the Buddha Dharma of other power, nothing upon which they rely can help them escape samsara. And then it says, by contrast, even a person from the outset, deeply confused by deluded love, finds salvation in Amida's heart, working through the original vow. Amida accounts for grave karmic conditions leading seekers to bottomless hell, including the great crimes of 5 transgressions, slandering the Dharma, and so forth. As such, distraction by heartrending cries of painful parting from loved ones doesn't matter at all. So, in Kakunyu throughout, especially in the Gaijasho or against heresies text, he really criticizes a lot of customs and ideas that were prevalent, even within Shin Buddhist circles, especially some of the missionary, things that were being used to popularize Jodo Shinshu by Bukoji, which was actually, the Bukoji was, way bigger than Hongwanji. So there may have also been some rivalry in Kakunyu's attacking of their methods of promulgating the Dharma. But, at one point, Kakunyu says, among the shocking things that, to us reading today, it's like, what? He says we shouldn't build temples. Temples are against the spirit of Shinran. Monks should not wear special vestments, because that puts them on a different level from the common people. And we shouldn't have name registers of members, because it gives the idea that they're going to be born in the Pure Land simply because their name is on a piece of paper. Wow. So those are just 3 of the things
ways
criticizes, and those are all things that we take for granted, as part of Buddhism today. But Kakunyu is saying these are all,
we're not meant to be doing that.
Divergences. We're not supposed to be doing any of that. It's really interesting reading.
Yeah, well, that.
And he's not wrong. He's not wrong, because if you think about it, there really isn't supposed to be we don't have monks and nuns, right? In our tradition, really. Yep. We have clerics. We have a clerical, clerics, I think is the best term. But we don't have monks and nuns in the
liturgical staff, perhaps you could call
Yeah,
it.
basically. I mean, somebody who leads the reading. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So
liturgical.
he's not wrong, and it's very much true that when the priests wear those special robes and stuff, they are kind of differentiating themselves from the people in the audience in a way that could be misinterpreted. You know what I mean? So someone
So how
just
does
visiting a temple might think, oh, well, that guy in the
Yeah.
robes is the real deal, and I'm not. So
Yeah.
it's interesting that Kakunyu critiques that from within the tradition based on Shinron's thought and writings, because a lot of religions don't really do that kind of self-critique, And again, this is mainly, he was directing it toward the Bukkoji, which was very popular sect of, really the biggest in the fastest growing sect of Jodo Shinshu at that period. So it wasn't entirely, internally directed, but it was an interesting critique that, if you really read what Shinron says, I have no disciples. A lot of the remarks Shinron said, I'm neither much of a lay person. I have no disciples, et cetera, et cetera. It really is in keeping with that spirit.
Yeah.
But of course, if Shinshu hadn't developed as a religion, with all of its structures and traditions, it wouldn't have been passed down to us. So
I'm
there's
thinking,
a real.
was there a later Monshu or later scholars or later liturgical decision making about that, maybe interpreting it in a different way that though we don't have monks and nuns, we don't have priests, we don't have, you do need to have a kind of liturgical administration, a liturgical
structures always
liturgical structure,
evolve, right?
liturgical leadership. Do you know what I mean? That isn't, it's not the same as being
And I would say
ordained.
it arises naturally. I mean, if you look at the way even modern groups go, you start out where everybody's more or less on the same, equals in this community, and then sooner or later, guess what? There's somebody who's got the robes, and they're on a different level from everybody else, right? It's the way things go.
It's a natural thing, I think. The thing is, with human beings, no matter how much we want to try to, no matter how much people trying to look for the right words here. So because I have no access to grind politically, but like, no matter how progressive or
equal
or equity or whatever we want to try to bring in, human beings in samsaric existence, the human realm is hierarchical. It just
finds ways of reasserting
and we're
itself,
not in
right?
it, and by virtue of being in samsara, things are not equal. Karmic causes and conditions aren't equal. Do you know what I mean? Like,
it's kind of like, if you think about it, that sutta in the Pali Canon where the Buddha kind of gives a sort of story of how human beings came to be, and how the social structures came to exist, we started out as beings of light, and then we saw there was this tasty mud, and we came down and we started eating it. It's a really interesting,
sweet honey, rice type,
really
brothy,
interesting.
And then eventually it started being embodied a bit, embodied light.
We got more and more material, and then
eventually
all of this
pairing off between the genders kind of
developed
in the course of death and rebirth and karmically, and then eventually people started having sex, and then people started throwing stones at them for having sex publicly.
Yeah, and then they needed somebody to protect
To administer,
the
yeah.
to
Eventually it got to, and then there were
administer, so they
people. Oh
decided
yeah,
to give the
because
power
people
to
were,
one person.
and like that's the sex part of it. But the eating part of it even was people were at first with that rice, the rice like
Yeah,
substance. People were just the beings were just people. I shouldn't call them beings. They were, well, I guess they call them human. It was the human realm of a much higher order kind of thing. But like the beings at that point started taking more than like at first they were just taking what they needed, but
yeah,
then people
yeah,
started going, oh, this is really good. Let's just take another one just for later.
yeah.
And then people just started
Stockpiling.
taking stockpiling, and then just that started happening with everything. So eventually
Yeah,
they needed a king. They needed
they needed
somebody,
somebody
and
to,
the
protect
king
stuff.
arose out of that. The
Yeah,
original chakra of Artans arose out of that need to start
yeah.
administrating.
And then he describes how they started putting people to death, and all these things, parts of this society, how society basically evolved. And it's interesting because the Buddha is not like endorsing any of that. It's like
No,
the implication is that we would have been better off staying as beings of light, right? But and I think it's interesting too because probably if you think of how life first arose or evolved on planet Earth, you know, we assume that it came from some sort of, microorganisms and stuff, but it probably was in, these little creatures were essentially feeding off of the mud or the nutrients that were
yeah,
on the surface of the planet. And then originally there were no two sexes or however many sexes, there
yeah,
was,
yeah.
and it evolved. So I think it's interesting how there's some parallels between
There are, yeah,
the
yes, yeah,
story and then what we
yeah,
understand
yeah,
scientifically
yeah.
about,
There's some
how life
congruence
arose.
there. There's definitely some
Yeah.
congruence,
It's kind of like in the
or
Abhidharma.
no, I wouldn't say complete compatibility, but
No. I mean,
you could see
obviously,
it.
it's
You
a
can
different.
kind of see the general gist,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know.
Well,
Yeah,
it's obviously
yeah,
you know, a story or a kind of
yeah.
a mythology that the Buddha is, telling for a moral to make a
Yeah.
moral and an ethical
Well,
point. But
mythology in the sense that the original meaning of mythology is
yeah,
to put something into a narrative form that's
right.
otherwise not understandable. It's to
Yeah, yeah.
understand the inconceivable. It's a way
Hmm.
to communicate about and understand a truth, a very
Exactly.
oceanic, inconceivable uh, meaning, that's way beyond the human mind to and mythology
Right.
is a way to understand that. So it's mythology is true in the sense it's trying to it's a way of communicating about a truth.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
in a way that
Yes,
is
absolutely. Yeah.
understandable. Yeah. So
It's
anyway,
not just um yeah, no, we could have a
yeah.
whole discussion about
That's a whole nother thing. Yeah, yeah. Because
that.
get really worried about that word mythology,
Yeah.
and it doesn't. They think,
Well,
and it's
unfortunately,
one of those things that took on another meaning. So
yes,
in common vernacular,
myth basically
it
means
became
lie
it's
now.
a myth. It's a that's just a
Yeah,
story. That's just a fairy
yeah,
tale. That's
a
just
false
a
story.
a folk story. That's not a real. Do you know what I mean?
Hmm.
But that's not what mythology. That's not what myth actually
Right.
truly
Actually,
means.
up until, well, I think well through the 20th century, myth was commonly used in its truer sense. I mean,
Mhm.
you even had Christian thinkers say, like C.S. Lewis used a term, said Christianity is a myth that happens to be true, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But recently, the new atheist movement has appropriated that term. I think to the point where we should probably stop using it, because
Yeah.
it's just you have things like I mean, you do have, like the Mythopoeic Society and stuff, which uses myth and continues to use myth in the true sense. But you also have these this new atheist movement that uses myth basically to mean like a lie or a false story
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
something
A
like
tale.
that, devoid of its
Yeah.
context historically. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's a whole
Cultural
other ball of
stories that
yarn
were
to
passed on,
yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I brought that up.
So,
Oh yeah, we were discussing
yeah, sorry.
equality and how these hierarchies emerge.
Yes.
But yeah,
And so
I
the
think,
need arises from the causes and conditions. The
right.
need arises for some kind of leadership, some kind of,
Yeah.
you can't be in samsara and in the human realm and not
Yeah.
have some kind of, no matter how, how utopian people want to think about these things,
Yeah.
you have to have it. You have to have some
Well,
kind.
and also in Japanese temples, you have the Naijin and the Geijin, the inner sanctuary and then the outer sanctuary where the people sit. And it's the Naijin is raised, it's like a dais, because in some way the priests who are allowed to enter the Naijin are on a different level on
Yeah.
people, right?
Yeah.
And in Rinyo's time, that probably wasn't the case. That probably came about after, in Rinyo's time, people.
Well, you see them all
same
sitting on the
level.
floor together.
Right,
You?
right.
They're all
Yeah,
sitting
yeah.
on the same level together. I wonder if this is one of the ways here where we, the genuineness we're talking about, being none other than our Bombu selves, enabled and empowered by Amida to do so, is one of those things that, part of the ignorant, foolish being life is you got to have some kind of leadership in some way, some kind of, you got to have, somebody needs to administer this thing. Somebody needs to keep things in a structure,
Right.
and not so that things don't get too out of bounds and people just behave. And you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, we need
that's,
rules, and I think it's just interesting that you see these early writings like by Cunio that are, kind of criticizing practices that he saw in his time as contrary to the spirit of Shinron, to the point where we shouldn't build temples. We should just have a dojo, or a simple meeting in houses to say the Nimbutsu and stuff, That's how, kind of radically true to Shinron's teaching Kakunyo wanted to be. Now, it's interesting, Kakunyo's son, Zonkaku Shonin, who's also we kind of revere as one of the earlier, Zonkaku was very much involved in Bukoji and in that missionary work, and he was much more open to the use of these things as skillful means to popularize Jodo Shinshu. And he was much more kind of cosmopolitan and broad in his view of Shinshu. He even studied, esoteric Buddhism, as while he was a Shin priest. He actually, studied esoteric Buddhism, basically Shingon and stuff, So if you read his writings, they're very intellectual. He makes references to all of the, esoteric paths and stuff. But at the same time, he actually has a very clear and very authentic emphasis on the truth of primal Tao and Shinshu teaching. He never confuses things when he's discussing Shinron, but he was more broad in his idea of what Shin Buddhism was. So between Kakunya Shonin and Zonkaku Shonin, you have this interesting difference kind of in their approach. And then you come much later to Rinyo. Rinyo kind of synthesizes a lot of these tensions that existed, as to like how should Shin Buddhism kind of practice.
Well, that sort of answers my question from earlier. Was there somebody else that kind of came in and?
Yeah, I mean, it was mainly Rinyo who really kind of established the Hongwanji in the sense, in a
And
in
the
the sense that we think
liturgy,
of it.
really, the basis of
Right.
the
He codified the liturgy being Shoshinge. Prior to Rinyo, the primary liturgy was Ojo Raison by Shantou. It wasn't even Shinron's writings. Rinyo really brought the focus back to Shinron as the founder. And, we see that with, Shoshinge becoming the primary liturgical text. And most other Shin sects, basically followed suit because it became so popular. And Rinyo actually printed Shoshinge Wasan as a book to distribute, to temples and everything. It just caught on so well that, all the other Shin temples saw how popular it was and said, oh, well, let's start doing that too.
Right. Well, we're at the 10-minute mark here. Do we want to try to read another?
Yeah, actually, so I was gonna.
Do you want to skip back to 18 now, or
Yeah,
not
well, we could.
skip on to 18? What?
Yeah,
Or,
let's do that. Let's look at 18 because it is interesting as sort of.
what were you going to say? There was something else you were thinking of.
Well, I was wondering if we want to get to the friendship, the passage on spiritual friendship from Holly.
I'd rather continue with this.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Let's do that.
And just Okay. So should we go to 18? We finished. We've done.
This is interesting. So
we went there.
Right, we had to jump around a bit because they didn't end in order.
There, right?
Yeah, so 18, you look at that one.
Is that 18 in the next one?
Yeah, that's 18. So, well, it's not, it's the order doesn't
Okay.
It doesn't matter. But on those in mourning, this is what Shinran taught. When meeting a person distraught over losing someone dear, so he's talking about how to comfort people that lost love. Recommend the medicine of the Buddha Dharma. Instruct and guide them on what it says about losing pets, the need sufferings in the human realm. Nothing is more painful than losing loved ones. First, speak the truth plainly. No one lives forever in this world of birth and death. Then explain the conditions for peace and happiness in the Pure Land. Although enmeshed in human suffering, we shall meet future grief and sorrow, but don't wish for Pure Land. Or aspire for the Pure Land. By contrast, leaving behind the six paths where only screams of suffering are heard, Zindo, Shantao, and Kyosho, and turning towards a pure where we enter Nirvana Palace. It's a translation. I would have said where we enter the Palace of Nirvana. Grief and sorrow enshrouding us vanishes in a new orientation to life. Unknowingly, we find ourselves lifted, benefiting from the light. Next, when meeting people, do not console them in a way that actually burdens them with more sadness. Here you see Shinron's compassion kind of coming out in the way he related. Already in mourning, feelings of loneliness immediately increase. Wine is called Boyu, which means forget your troubles. Comfort mourners by serving wine, leaving them once their smiles have returned. This is how we treat things. So this touches on the whole question of alcohol. You have to remember, we've got to be careful not to put our modern concept of things, Buddhism, society, etc., onto the past. Remember that only like fully ordained monks, say in the Tendai, would actually probably be required to observe not drinking alcohol. And most lay persons, even up to Yudo, or sort of kind of lay ordained, it was like a level below full ordination. They might observe certain precepts, but they wouldn't necessarily not ever drink or not ever eat meat and so on. In fact, there was the Uposatha days in Pali Canon where lay Buddhists would take on these sort of extra rules. But in general, only monks would have been, sort of expected to not drink and do this and that. One idea that modern people sometimes have, I think, that's actually sort of ahistorical, is that lay Buddhists necessarily keep all 5 of the lay precepts. And that's not the case. In fact, it's very common for lay Buddhists in Buddhist countries like Thailand and so on, or Vietnam, to only keep like one, because keeping only one is regarded as very difficult. Keeping all 5 is like super difficult.
if not impossible for us.
Actually, so you actually, the way that Buddhist countries and Buddhist cultures actually, relate to the precepts is probably different from, I think what happens is people read the text and assume that that's the way it was, kind of. You know what I mean? There's a sort of reading back onto this idea,
putting our own context, our own
yeah.
sense of meaning of what's being said onto that.
Right.
Time. Yeah.
So a plain reading of the Pali text on the precepts is, oh, well, lay people give the 5 precepts. Well, that's certainly the ideal, but the reality in Buddhist history was it was rare for someone to actually take all 5. Because if you took all 5 and you broke 1 or 2, then you're now guilty of breaking precepts. Whereas if you don't take them at all, in other words, it was viewed as worse to take them and then break them, as opposed to not taking them.
Taking them. Yeah.
You weren't encouraged to take a precept that you couldn't, possibly, or wouldn't actually keep. So there was that in like traditional Theravada Buddhist, context, of course. But in in Japan, of course, with this Mahayana, there was a wide spectrum between the ideal of the monk who perfectly kept all the precepts, and then the lay person who wasn't required to do really anything. There's this wide spectrum. Actually, there's a text in, believe it or not, this book, In the Buddha's Words, by Bhikkhu Bodhi collection, that really stuck it surprising. I think it really relates actually to Shin Buddhism in a way, and we could get to that and discuss that somewhere. I think it'll be a little eye-opening.
We've been talking about that a lot. We keep coming back to that. It keeps coming up, keeps getting mentioned. So it's almost like by not taking the precepts, first of all, we're taught that we have precepts we have no capacity for precepts. So the precepts don't really exist for us. For ordinary beings, they don't exist. Is that kind of the gist of the Shinran's teachings?
That's not a concept that originates with Shinran.
Shinran.
That came. That actually originated in China.
Yeah. So I mean,
that idea.
The idea of not taking the precepts is kind of in line with being our genuine selves, being our genuine Bombu selves. I want to get to the flip side of this. I do want to get to the Lamp for the Latter Ages stuff. And
do you want to have one more episode, a shorter one, or are you out of time? I don't actually have anything today, so if we want to go on, we can, but it's really up to you.
I could potentially. Yeah, we could. So we got a minute left here, minute and a half left.
So maybe we should move on to the Lamp of the Latter Ages and how that relates
to the next,
kind of to all of this.
In the next episode, yeah. The next, because I think I don't want people to have the impression that we don't, that this. Do you know what I mean? That it's just you're a Bombu, so just act like a Bombu and just do whatever you want.
To do whatever.
That's not at all. That's like not even. That's not at all what the teachings, say.
Not at all.
So we'll talk about that in the next installment or episode of this. So,
All right, sounds good.
all right.
So shall we
Thanks very much.
close
Yeah.
with some
Number
nuance?
two.
Namu
Namo Amida-butsu. Namo. 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 Namo.
All right. See you soon.
Take care.
We're not thieves. But we are thieves.
What exactly are you supposed to be?
Space cowboy.
Okay, A, there are no cows in space. B, didn't you wear that like 5 years ago?
So?
So don't you think you should move on?
I like it.
The dialoguer certainly showed being called a cow thief is not so bad if you're embraced by a Mide Buddha. And if I'm honest, I think the host seems quite virile.